On February 14, 1867, 9 residents of the Darkwood boarding house in Goldfield, Nevada, sat down for their evening meal. By sunrise, their chairs remained empty, their beds undisturbed, their personal belongings untouched. No doors were forced, no windows broken. They had simply ceased to exist. Goldfield, Nevada in 1867 was a town born from desperation and sustained by dreams of silver fortune. Perched on the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada range, the settlement had erupted around a promising ore deposit discovered 2 years earlier by prospector James McKinley, whose initial claims had yielded enough raw silver to attract hundreds of fortune seekers from California's played-out goldfields. The town itself was a testament to frontier pragmatism over aesthetic consideration. Main Street stretched barely 4 blocks, lined with hastily constructed buildings that served the needs of a transient population. Murphy's General Store, the Silver Dollar Saloon, Henley's Assay Office, and Dr. Samuel Morrison's medical practice, which doubled as the town's unofficial morgue. Most structures were built from rough-hewn pine lumber hauled up from the Carson Valley, their walls chinked with mud and newspaper to keep out the bitter mountain winds that howled down from the peaks throughout the winter months. The Darkwood boarding house stood at the northern end of Main Street, a 2-story structure that had been built with more care and expense than most of Goldfield's establishments. Constructed from locally quarried stone and finished with imported hardwood, it served as temporary accommodation for miners, traveling merchants, and the occasional territorial official conducting business in the Silver District. The building's proprietor, Martha Henley, widow of the town's founder and sister to the assay office owner, had established a reputation for maintaining clean rooms, serving wholesome meals, and asking few questions about her guests' backgrounds or business. February 1867 had been particularly harsh, with snowfall that blocked the mountain passes and effectively isolated Goldfield from outside contact for weeks at a time. The boarding house had become a gathering point for residents weathering the winter storms, its common room serving as an informal social center where men shared news from their claims, debated territorial politics, and played cards to pass the long evenings. 9 individuals had taken up residence at the Darkwood boarding house during that bitter February. 5 miners working claims in the surrounding hills, 2 traveling merchants waiting for the passes to clear, a territorial surveyor mapping the district's mineral resources, and a woman of indeterminate background who had arrived on the last stage before the winter storms closed the roads. Each had paid their weekly rent in advance, each had established daily routines that revolved around the boarding house's meal schedule, and each had given Martha Henley no reason to expect their sudden departure. The last person to see all 9 residents together was Martha herself, as she served their evening meal on February 14th. She would later tell investigators that nothing about that Valentine's Day dinner had seemed unusual, just another quiet evening in a mining town waiting for spring to unlock the mountain passes and restore connection to the outside world. The residents of the Darkwood boarding house represented a cross-section of frontier Nevada society, each drawn to Goldfield by circumstances that reflected the complex motivations driving westward expansion in the post-Civil War era. Thomas Brennan and his younger brother Patrick had arrived from the Colorado Territory after their Leadville silver claim played out, carrying enough savings to finance a modest prospecting operation in Nevada's promising mineral district. Thomas, 34 and a veteran of the Union Army, approached mining with the methodical discipline of a man who had survived Antietam and Gettysburg. Patrick, 26 and prone to optimistic speculation about ore deposits, balanced his brother's caution with enthusiasm that kept them working claims other men might have abandoned. Jacob Steinberg and Emil Kowalski had formed a partnership based on complementary skills rather than friendship. Steinberg, a German immigrant with experience in the Black Forest silver mines, understood ore geology with scientific precision. Kowalski, a former coal miner from Pennsylvania, possessed the physical strength and tunneling expertise necessary for extracting ore from Nevada's challenging terrain. Their partnership had proven profitable enough to maintain continuous residence at the boarding house since October. The fifth miner, a man who gave his name only as Samuel Cray, remained enigmatic despite months of shared meals and evening conversations. He claimed experience in Montana's goldfields, but spoke with an educated accent that suggested Eastern upbringing. His mining equipment was expensive and professionally maintained, yet he worked his claim alone and never discussed his background beyond vague references to previous endeavors in territorial development. The two merchants, Harold Wickham and David Lang, had been traveling together since California, carrying manufactured goods intended for mining communities throughout Nevada and Utah territories. Wickham specialized in tools and equipment essential for mining operations, while Lang dealt in luxury items, imported foods, quality textiles, books and newspapers that brought civilization's comforts to frontier settlements. Both men possessed the quick wit and social adaptability necessary for successful commerce in volatile mining communities. Charles Morton, the territorial surveyor, had arrived in January with official credentials and surveying equipment worth more than most miners, earned in a full season. His work involved mapping Goldfield's mineral deposits for territorial development planning, though his precise mission remained unclear to the boarding house's other residents. Morton maintained professional discretion about his work while participating sociably in evening conversations. The ninth resident presented the greatest mystery. The woman who registered as Miss Catherine Vale had arrived on the last stage before winter storms closed the mountain passes, carrying minimal luggage and paying her rent with gold coins of unusual mintage. Her refined manner and expensive clothing suggested wealth and education, yet she offered no explanation for her presence in a rough mining town during the most isolated months of winter. Each of these 9 individuals had established routines and relationships that made their simultaneous disappearance all the more inexplicable. February 14, 1867 began like any other winter day in Goldfield, with temperatures well below freezing and winds that drove snow against the windows of the Darkwood boarding house in rhythmic patterns that had become the soundtrack of the isolated community's daily life. Martha Henley rose before dawn to stoke the kitchen fires and begin preparation for the hearty breakfast that had earned her establishment its reputation among the mining district's transient population. The 9 residents followed their established routines with the precision of people who had adapted to confined winter living. The Brennan brothers descended from their shared room at precisely 7 o'clock, their mining clothes already donned for another day, working their claim despite the harsh weather. Jacob Steinberg and Emil Kowalski appeared shortly after, their partnership evident in the way they coordinated their movements without verbal communication. Samuel Cray, as always, took his breakfast alone, at the corner table reading from a leather-bound journal he never permitted others to examine. The merchants, Wickham and Lang, spent the morning inventorying their goods and discussing business strategies for when the mountain passes reopened. Charles Morton worked at his surveying calculations, spread across a table in the common room where the winter light provided adequate illumination for his precise measurements and mapping notations. Miss Catherine Vale remained in her room until midday, emerging only for brief appearances that left the other residents speculating about her background and purpose in Goldfield. Martha Henley's daily routine included preparing 3 meals that brought all 9 residents together in the boarding house's dining room. Breakfast and lunch were typically brief affairs, with residents focused on their individual pursuits. The evening meal, however, had evolved into a social gathering where conversation ranged from mining prospects to territorial politics to speculation about when spring weather would restore their connection to the outside world. On the evening of February the 14th, Martha served a meal that reflected both her culinary skills and the limitations imposed by winter isolation. Venison stew prepared from meat traded with local hunters, biscuits made from her dwindling flour supplies, preserved vegetables from her root cellar, and coffee that had been carefully rationed to last through the remaining winter months. The conversation that evening centered on speculation about ore deposits in the surrounding hills, with the miners sharing information about promising geological formations they had identified during their winter work. The merchants contributed insights about market conditions for silver in California and the Eastern Territories. Charles Morton offered technical observations about the region's mineral potential based on his surveying work. Miss Catherine Vale participated more actively in the evening's conversation than usual, asking informed questions. about mining techniques and demonstrating knowledge of geological processes that surprised the other residents. Her contributions to the discussion created an atmosphere of unusual intellectual engagement that Martha would later remember as the evening's most distinctive characteristic. At precisely 9 o'clock, the 9 residents retired to their rooms, leaving Martha to clean the dining room and prepare for another day of winter isolation. Martha Henley woke at her customary hour of 5:30 a.m. on February the 15th, roused not by her internal clock, but by an unsettling quality of silence that seemed to press against her consciousness like a physical weight. The Darkwood boarding house, which had become familiar through months of winter routine, felt fundamentally different in ways she could not immediately identify. The absence of sound was the first anomaly her mind registered. During the previous months of winter residence, the boarding house's morning hours had been punctuated by familiar noises, footsteps on the wooden floors above, the creak of bed frames as residents prepared for their daily routines, muffled conversations between the Brennan brothers as they planned their mining activities, the sound of water being poured from pitchers into wash basins. This morning, the building remained as silent as a tomb. Martha dressed quickly and descended to the kitchen, her footsteps echoing through empty hallways with unusual resonance. She began her breakfast preparations as usual, lighting the stove and setting water to boil for coffee, expecting that the familiar sounds of cooking would soon draw residents down from their rooms. The kitchen's warmth and the aroma of frying bacon had never failed to attract at least 1 or 2 early risers seeking coffee and conversation before the formal breakfast hour. By 7 o'clock, when the Brennan brothers customarily appear, head for their meal, the dining room remained empty. Martha climbed the stairs to the second floor where the boarding house's 8 guest rooms. He heard the same thing, a sound like whispering voices speaking in unison, words in no language any of them recognized, yet somehow familiar in the most terrifying way. The search was becoming something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. That evening, as the search party gathered in the Sycamore Creek Tavern to warm their bones and steady their nerves, Reverend Joshua Blackwood made a confession that would change everything the townspeople thought they knew about the Wainwright sisters. The tavern's main room, usually filled with the comfortable sounds of frontier conversation, fell into an oppressive silence as the man of God stood before the assembled searchers. His face, normally composed with the serene confidence of faith, was ashen with fear and guilt. His hands trembled as he removed a leather-bound journal from his coat, a journal that several men recognized as belonging to the church records. "I have not been entirely truthful about the Wainwright family," Blackwood began, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are things written in the old church records, things that previous ministers thought best forgotten, but after what we found today, God forgive me, I can no longer remain silent." The journal contained entries dating back to 1847, when the Wainwright parents, Jeremiah and Abigail, had first arrived in Calhoun County. According to Reverend Mitchell, Blackwood's predecessor, the family had come from the eastern settlements under circumstances that were never entirely clear. They spoke little of their past, paid for their land in silver coins of an unusual mint, and carried letters of introduction that seemed authentic yet referenced churches that couldn't be verified. But it was Abigail Wainwright who had truly concerned Reverend Mitchell. The woman possessed knowledge that troubled him deeply. She could predict weather with uncanny accuracy. Uracy seemed to know things about townspeople that she should have no way of knowing, and her daughters exhibited the same unsettling abilities. Young Eleanor, in particular, had once approached the Reverend after a Sunday service to warn him that his wife would fall ill with fever when the moon turns dark. 3 days later, Mrs. Mitchell had indeed taken to her bed with a mysterious ailment that lasted exactly as long as Eleanor had predicted. More disturbing still were the entries from the summer of 1849, just months before the current disappearance. Reverend Mitchell had documented several instances where townspeople reported seeing the Wainwright women engaged in what he termed unnatural practices. They were observed gathering herbs under the full moon, speaking in languages that sounded ancient and wrong, and conducting what appeared to be rituals in the very clearing where today's search had uncovered such horrifying evidence. The final entry in Mitchell's journal, dated just weeks before his sudden death from a heart attack, contained a single, chilling line. "I fear the Wainwright women are not what they appear to be. and I pray God will protect this community from whatever darkness they may bring upon us." As Blackwood closed the journal, every man in that tavern understood that they were no longer searching for two missing farm girls. They were confronting something that challenged their understanding of the natural world itself. Dawn of the third day brought news that sent ice through the veins of every soul in Calhoun County. The unnatural clearing in the oak grove had grown during the night, expanding its circle of blackened earth by another 10 feet in all directions. Worse still, the warmth that emanated from the cursed ground had intensified, creating a pocket of unnatural heat that could be felt from 50 yards away. Samuel Morrison, brave and earnest, ought to venture back to the site before sunrise, reported that the dead trees around the perimeter were now housed her 9 residents. She knocked gently on each door, calling out breakfast announcements that received no response. The hallway seemed to absorb her voice without producing even an echo. When polite knocking failed to rouse any residents, Martha's concern overcame her respect for privacy. She tried the door handles and found each room unlocked, a detail that would later prove significant to investigators. The Brennan brothers' room contained their beds, neatly made but clearly unslept in. Their mining equipment, clothes, and personal possessions remained exactly as they had been arranged the previous evening. Each room told the same story: beds that had not been disturbed, personal belongings left precisely as their owners had arranged them, no signs of struggle or hasty departure. Samuel Cray's mysterious journal lay open on his bedside table, revealing pages covered in symbols and notations that Martha could not interpret. Miss Catherine Vale's expensive dresses hung in her wardrobe as if awaiting her return, and her jewelry case remained unlocked with its valuable contents undisturbed. The most unsettling discovery came in Charles Morton's room, where his surveying equipment and territorial maps remained spread across his work table. Among his papers, Martha found calculations and measurements that seemed to focus on the Darkwood boarding house itself, as if the building had been the primary subject of his official surveying mission. 9 people had simply vanished without leaving any trace of their departure or any indication of where they might have gone. Martha Henley's discovery of 9 empty rooms sent her into the bitter February morning with a panic that overcame her usual frontier pragmatism. Goldfield's main street lay buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, but she struggled through the drifts toward the nearest occupied building, Murphy's General Store, where proprietor Sean Murphy maintained early hours to serve miners beginning their daily work. Murphy, a practical Irish immigrant who had survived California's gold rush before establishing his Nevada business, listened to Martha's breathless account with the skeptical attention of a man who had heard numerous tall tales from isolation-addled frontier residents. However, Martha's reputation for reliability and her obvious distress convinced him that investigation was warranted, regardless of how implausible her story might seem. Together, they returned to the Darkwood boarding house, where Murphy confirmed Martha's observations with the methodical thoroughness of a man accustomed to evaluating mining claims and business propositions. Each room contained evidence of recent habitation but no indication of departure. Personal belongings remained undisturbed, valuable items lay in plain sight, and the absence of any signs of struggle suggested that the residents had left voluntarily, yet without taking anything they would need for travel in harsh winter conditions. Murphy's practical mind immediately focused on logical explanations. Could they have left during the night for some group expedition? He asked. Though his tone suggested he found this possibility unlikely, the February weather would have made nighttime travel extremely dangerous, and none of the missing residents had expressed interest in collaborative ventures beyond their established mining partnerships. A search of the boarding house's common areas revealed additional anomalies. The dining room showed no signs of disturbance from the previous evening's meal, yet the dishes had been cleared and washed with unusual thoroughness. The parlor, where residents typically gathered for evening conversation, contained evidence of recent use, but no personal items that might indicate the residents' plans or intent. Irons. Most significantly, Murphy discovered that the boarding house's guest register, a leather-bound ledger where Martha recorded arrivals, departures, and rent payments, was missing from its customary place on the front desk. The absence of this record eliminated the most obvious source of information about the missing residents' backgrounds and registration details. Murphy organized the first systematic search of Goldfield's limited territory, recruiting every available man to examine buildings, mine shafts, and the surrounding landscape for any trace of the missing residents. The search parties discovered that the previous night's snowfall had covered any footprints or other signs of passage, creating conditions that would have made tracking impossible even under normal circumstances. As word of the disappearances spread through Goldfield's small population, residents began to recall details about the missing 9 that had seemed unremarkable at the time but now took on ominous significance. The investigation had begun, but it would soon reveal that the Darkwood boarding house harbored secrets far more disturbing than simple, unexplained disappearances. The organized search of Goldfield revealed details about the missing residents that transformed curiosity into genuine alarm. Dr. Samuel Morrison, whose medical practice served the mining community, provided information that cast the disappearances in an increasingly sinister light. "Thomas Brennan came to see me 3 days ago," Dr. Morrison reported to the gathering of concerned townspeople. "He complained of disturbing dreams, nightmares about being underground, surrounded by voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize. He appeared genuinely frightened, which was unusual for a man of his military background and practical temperament." Similar accounts emerged from other Goldfield residents who had interacted with the missing individuals during their final days. Sarah Murphy, Sean's wife, recalled that Emil Kowalski had visited the general store on February the 13th, seeking supplies for what he described as an extended expedition, though he had been vague about the nature and destination of this venture. His purchasing list had included rope, lanterns, and preserved food sufficient for several days of travel, items that seemed inconsistent with his established mining routine. Charles Morton, the territorial surveyor, had attracted particular attention from Goldfield's residents due to his official status and mysterious work. Reverend William Hayes, who conducted weekly services in the town's makeshift church, revealed that Morton had approached him with unusual questions about the area's indigenous history. He was particularly interested in Paiute stories about the mountain, Hayes explained, legends about sacred places and warnings about disturbing certain locations. "I told him such tales were mere superstition, but he seemed to take them quite seriously." The most disturbing revelation came from Martha Henley herself, who had been too shocked by the disappearances to mention details that now seemed crucial. On the night of February the 13th, the evening before the residents vanished, she had been awakened by sounds from the boarding house's basement. The building had been constructed with a stone foundation that included storage space for coal and preserved foods, but Martha had always kept the basement locked due to structural concerns about the rough stone construction. "I heard voices," she admitted, her hands trembling as she spoke. "Multiple people talking quietly, but I couldn't make out the words. When I went to investigate, I found the basement door standing open, though I was certain I had locked it before retiring. I called down but received no answer. The voices had stopped, and I convinced myself I had been dreaming." Sean Murphy organized an immediate exploration of the boarding house's basement, gathering lanterns and rope for what had become a formal investigation rather than a simple search for missing persons. The basement, which Martha had described as a simple storage area, proved to contain architectural features that did not appear on any building plans and suggested purposes far more complex than food preservation. The mystery of the missing 9 residents was evolving into something that challenged the rational understanding of everyone involved in the investigation. The basement of the Darkwood boarding house descended far deeper into the earth than any normal foundation would require, its stone walls disappearing beyond the reach of their lantern light. Sean Murphy, leading the investigation with Dr. Morrison and Reverend Hayes, discovered that what Martha Henley had believed to be a simple storage cellar was actually the entrance to an extensive underground complex that extended beneath much of Goldfield's main street. The stone construction showed craftsmanship that exceeded anything found in the hastily built mining town above. Each block had been precisely cut and fitted without mortar, creating walls that remained solid despite decades of mountain weather and geological stress. The technique resembled ancient European masonry, yet the symbols carved into certain stones belonged to no architectural tradition any of the investigators recognized. Dr. Morrison, whose medical education had included study of anatomy and physiology, identified some of the carved symbols as representations of human internal organs, but rendered with accuracy that surpassed contemporary medical knowledge. These diagrams show structures that weren't discovered until recent advances in surgical technique, he observed, his voice echoing strangely in the stone chambers, yet the carving style suggests they were made years, possibly decades ago. The basement's layout defied logical construction principles. Corridors branched in multiple directions, creating a maze-like network that seemed designed to confuse rather than facilitate navigation. Some passages descended to lower levels, while others appeared to connect with natural cave systems that honeycombed the mountain beneath Goldfield. The air currents suggested openings to the surface that had been carefully concealed from outside observation. Reverend Hayes discovered evidence that the basement had been used for gatherings that had nothing to do with food storage or typical household activities. A large chamber contained seating arranged in concentric circles around a flat stone surface that bore stains too dark to be natural rock discoloration. The walls of this chamber were covered with writing in multiple languages, Latin phrases mixed with symbols that resembled indigenous pictographs and scripts that appeared to be entirely unknown. Most disturbing of all was the evidence of recent occupation. Personal belongings that clearly belonged to the missing residents were scattered throughout the basement complex. Samuel Cray's mysterious journal, Charles Morton's surveying instruments, items of clothing that Martha Henley recognized as belonging to various boarders. The belongings were not abandoned carelessly, but arranged with deliberate precision in patterns that suggested ritualistic purpose. In the deepest chamber they could access, the investigators found something that made their blood freeze. 9 sets of clothes, neatly folded and arranged in a perfect circle around the stone surface. Each set was complete, from outer garments to underclothes to personal jewelry, as if the residents had undressed systematically before disappearing entirely. Sean Murphy realized that they were not investigating a disappearance, but something far more sinister. A carefully planned event that had been prepared for months, possibly years, and that involved knowledge of Goldfield's hidden underground geography that no recent arrivals should have possessed. As the investigation party explored deeper into the basement complex, they discovered that the Darkwood boarding house had been constructed not as an ordinary frontier building, but as a deliberate gateway to an underground network that predated European settlement by centuries. The stone passages connected to natural cave systems that extended throughout the mountain, creating a hidden transportation network that could facilitate movement across vast distances without surface detection. Dr. Morrison's medical training allowed him to recognize that the carved symbols throughout the complex represented more than simple anatomical knowledge. These markings document procedures, he explained to his companions, his voice tight with professional horror. Surgical techniques, pharmaceutical preparations, methods for modifying human physiology that surpass anything taught in contemporary medical schools. The procedures depicted in the stone carvings showed systematic approaches to human enhancement that bore disturbing similarities to experimental techniques Morrison had heard whispered about in the darkest corners of medical conferences. Detailed diagrams illustrated methods for increasing sensory perception, enhancing physical strength, and modifying cognitive function through combinations of surgery, chemistry, and practices that seemed to transcend purely scientific methodology. Reverend Hayes found his theological training challenged by religious iconography that blended Christian symbols with elements drawn from traditions he could not identify. Crosses were carved alongside pictographs that resembled Native American spiritual representations, but arranged in patterns that suggested synthesis rather than conflict between different belief systems. Someone has been attempting to merge different religious traditions, he observed, though his tone suggested uncertainty about whether this represented enlightenment or blasphemy. Sean Murphy's practical frontier experience helped him interpret the complex's layout as a carefully planned installation designed to support extended operations by groups of considerable size. Storage chambers contained preserved foods, medical supplies, and equipment that would allow dozens of people to survive underground for months. Sleeping areas had been carved into the stone walls with precision that indicated permanent rather than temporary occupation. Most significantly, they discovered evidence that the complex had been actively used throughout Goldfield's brief history. Mining equipment bore dates that corresponded to the town's establishment, medical supplies showed recent manufacture, and personal belongings suggested that numerous individuals had passed through the underground network over the past 2 years. A detailed map carved into one chamber's wall revealed the true scope of what they had discovered. The network extended far beyond Goldfield, connecting to similar installations throughout Nevada Territory and beyond. Each site was marked with symbols that indicated its function. Some appeared to be way stations for underground travel, others were marked as research facilities, and several bore designations that suggested purposes too complex for the investigators to understand. The Darkwood boarding house was not an isolated frontier establishment, but a crucial node in a network that spanned the American West, facilitating activities that required complete secrecy from territorial and federal authorities. The 9 missing residents had not disappeared. They had graduated to a level of the operation that normal human consciousness was not permitted to witness. Among Charles Morton's abandoned surveying equipment, the investigators discovered documents that revealed his true mission in Goldfield had nothing to do with routine territorial mapping. Hidden within his official papers were correspondence and credentials that identified him as an agent of a FED rail program operating under the highest levels of government secrecy. Dr. Morrison, whose medical education had included training in document analysis, examined Morton's hidden papers with growing alarm. "These authorizations come directly from the Department of the Interior," he announced to his companions, "but they reference programs and objectives that don't appear in any official territorial policy I've encountered." The correspondence revealed that Morton had been dispatched to Goldfield specifically to evaluate the underground complex beneath the Darkwood boarding house. His surveying work above ground had been a cover for detailed mapping of the subterranean network, with particular attention to its capacity for supporting large-scale operations involving human subjects. His reports, written in a cipher that Reverend Hayes was able to partially decode using his theological training in ancient languages, documented findings that suggested the federal government had been aware of the network's existence for years. Subject population shows exceptional adaptability to conditioning protocols, read one decoded passage. Isolation factors and mineral environment create optimal circumstances for experimental implementation. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 operations with current residents as initial test group. Sean Murphy's business experience helped him understand the logistical implications of Morton's documentation. This isn't some random frontier mystery, he realized with growing horror. It's a carefully planned government operation using Goldfield's residents as experimental subjects. The mining town was selected specifically because our isolation would prevent outside interference and our transient population would mask disappearances. The most chilling discovery came in Morton's detailed psychological profiles of each missing resident. He had been observing and evaluating the 9 individuals for months, documenting their personality traits, physical capabilities, social relationships, and psychological vulnerabilities. Each file concluded with recommendations for their suitability for what the documents termed advanced enhancement procedures. Thomas and Patrick Brennan were classified as optimal subjects due to military discipline and fraternal loyalty bonds. Jacob Steinberg and Emil Kowalski rated high marks for technical skills and partnership cooperation potential. Samuel Cray's mysterious background was revealed in government files that identified him as a former intelligence operative whose specialized training and psychological profile indicate exceptional adaptation potential. The merchants, Wickham and Lang, had been selected for their social adaptability and commercial network connections. Miss Catherine Vale's entry was marked Priority 1 Subject, with notes indicating she possessed rare genetic markers and educational background essential for leadership functions. Morton's final report, dated February the 13th, contained a single ominous recommendation. All subjects prepared for Phase 2 implementation. Underground facility optimal for procedures. Recommend immediate commencement of enhancement protocols. The 9 residents had not vanished randomly. They had been carefully selected, studied, and prepared for transformation into something that served purposes beyond normal human understanding. The federal government was conducting systematic experimentation on American citizens, using isolated communities as laboratories for programs that challenged the very definition of humanity. Hidden within Charles Morton's most secure documents, the investigators found detailed technical specifications for what the government files termed Project Metamorphosis, a systematic program for human enhancement that combined medical procedures, psychological conditioning, and techniques that seemed to transcend conventional scientific understanding. Dr. Morrison's medical training allowed him to interpret the clinical documentation, though what he read challenged everything he had learned about human physiology and the limits of surgical intervention. These procedures describe modifications to nervous system function, sensory organ enhancement, and cognitive restructuring that should be impossible with current medical knowledge. He explained to his increasingly horrified companions. The enhancement protocol involved 3 phases of transformation, each designed to push human capabilities beyond normal biological limitations. Phase 1 consisted of psychological conditioning using techniques that combined sensory deprivation, chemical supplementation, and exposure to what the documents termed consciousness-expanding stimuli. Subjects were gradually prepared for more extensive modifications through careful manipulation of their mental state and physical condition. Phase 2 involved surgical procedures that modified brain structure, nervous system function, and sensory organs to achieve enhanced perception, improved coordination, and expanded cognitive abilities. The technical descriptions included diagrams that showed surgical techniques Morrison had never encountered, using instruments and methods that surpassed anything taught in contemporary medical schools. Phase 3 represented complete integration of enhanced subjects into what the documents described as collective operational units. Individuals who successfully completed the first 2 phases underwent final modifications that allowed them to function as part of a coordinated group consciousness while retaining their specialized skills and knowledge. Reverend Hayes discovered that the enhancement protocol included spiritual elements that challenged his understanding of religious practice and divine purpose. "They're attempting to create beings that transcend normal human limitations," he said, his voice hollow with theological horror. "Not through divine grace or spiritual development, but through systematic manipulation of consciousness and physiology." Sean Murphy found business records that revealed the economic scope of Project Metamorphosis. The program operated through a network of installations throughout the American territories, funded through classified federal appropriations and supported by private interests that included mining companies, railroad developers, and territorial administrators. Enhanced subjects were deployed in roles that required capabilities beyond normal human limitations: intelligence gathering, technological development, and what the documents termed population management operations. The files revealed that Goldfield was one of dozens of communities serving as testing sites for enhancement procedures. Each location had been selected for specific characteristics: geographical isolation, transient populations, economic dependence on extractive industries, and minimal federal oversight. The residents served as unwitting experimental subjects, gradually conditioned for eventual transformation into enhanced operatives serving classified federal objectives. The 9 missing residents from the Darkwood boarding house had not disappeared. They had been processed through the enhancement protocol and deployed to serve purposes that normal human consciousness was not permitted to understand. They were no longer missing, they were no longer entirely human, and they were no longer acting according to their own will. The network maps found in Charles Morton's papers revealed that the underground complex beneath Goldfield connected to a vast transportation system that spanned the American West, facilitating the movement of enhanced subjects between installations without surface detection. This shadow railroad operated parallel to legitimate territorial development, supporting activities that required complete secrecy from civilian populations and conventional government oversight. Dr. Morrison traced the network's medical facilities, discovering that each major node included surgical suites, recovery chambers, and research laboratories equipped for advanced human experimentation. The scope of this operation requires coordination between dozens of sites and hundreds of personnel, he observed with professional horror. They've created an entire medical infrastructure dedicated to systematic human modification. The transportation routes followed natural geological features, cave systems, underground rivers, and mineral formations that provided both concealment and the environmental conditions necessary for enhanced subject operations. Reverend Hayes recognized that the network incorporated sacred sites from multiple indigenous traditions, suggesting that its builders understood connections between geography, consciousness, and spiritual transformation that European settlers had dismissed as primitive superstition. Sean Murphy's business acumen helped him understand the logistical complexity of moving people, supplies, and equipment through the underground network without detection by territorial authorities. This represents decades of construction and millions of dollars in investment, he calculated. The federal government has been building a parallel civilization beneath the American territories, one that operates according to entirely different principles than surface society. The network's communication system used techniques that challenged contemporary understanding of long-distance messaging. Documents described methods for transmitting information through underground acoustic channels, electromagnetic phenomena associated with certain mineral deposits, and what appeared to be direct consciousness-to-consciousness communication between enhanced subjects. Enhanced operatives could coordinate activities across vast distances without relying on conventional telegraph or postal systems. Most disturbing were references to harvest operations, systematic collection of suitable subjects from isolated ties throughout the territories. The documents revealed that communities like Goldfield were monitored continuously, their populations evaluated for enhancement potential. Individuals who displayed desired characteristics were gradually conditioned for recruitment, often without their conscious awareness of the selection process. The Darkwood boarding house represented just one harvest point in a network that included frontier hotels, mining camps, railroad stations, and military outposts throughout the West. Each facility served as both a screening location and a processing center where selected subjects underwent preliminary conditioning before transport to major enhancement installations. The investigation party realized that they were not simply uncovering a local mystery, but exposing a secret program that challenged the fundamental nature of American territorial development. The West was being populated not just by settlers seeking opportunity, but by enhanced beings serving classified objectives that normal human citizens were not permitted to understand. They faced a choice: attempt to expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of federal government, or accept that they had discovered truths too dangerous for public knowledge. As the investigation continued, Sean Murphy began to notice signs that their activities were being observed by individuals who had not been part of Goldfield's original population. Strangers appeared at the edges of their vision, figures who vanished when directly observed, shadows that moved independently of their sources, and sounds that suggested the presence of watchers with enhanced sensory capabilities. Dr. Morrison's medical training helped him recognize that the watchers demonstrated coordination and sensory abilities that exceeded normal human limitations. They move with perfect silence across terrain that should make no noise, he observed during one of their basement explorations. Their positioning suggests they can see in conditions of minimal light, and they coordinate their surveillance without visible or audible communication. The watchers appeared to be monitoring the investigation party's progress through the underground complex, ensuring that their discoveries remained within acceptable parameters while preventing them from accessing areas that contained more sensitive information. Reverend Hayes noted that the surveillance felt less like hostile observation than like careful guidance. The watchers seemed to be managing their investigation rather than opposing it. They want us to discover certain information, Hayes realized with growing unease. Our investigation is not threatening their operations, it's serving their purposes. We're being allowed to learn specific facts while being prevented from uncovering details that might enable effective resistance. Sean Murphy's frontier experience helped him recognize tracking techniques that surpassed anything used by conventional scouts or military personnel. The watchers left no footprints, disturbed no vegetation, and created no sound signature that normal senses could detect. Their surveillance methods suggested training and enhancement that placed them beyond the capabilities of ordinary human operatives. The investigation party began to understand that their discovery of the underground complex had not been accidental. The missing residents' belongings had been arranged to guide their exploration in specific directions. Documents had been left accessible in locations where they would be found by competent investigators. Even their ability to decode certain encrypted materials had been facilitated by clues that led them to the necessary interpretive keys. "We're not investigating a mystery," Murphy concluded with dawning horror. "We're being recruited. They're using our discovery process to evaluate our suitability for integration into their operations." The realization that their investigation was itself part of the enhancement protocol created a new level of psychological pressure. Each new discovery could be either genuine intelligence or carefully planted information designed to condition their minds for eventual transformation. The Watchers were not simply observing their actions, they were studying their reactions, documenting their capabilities, and preparing detailed psychological profiles for future use. The investigation party faced the terrifying possibility that they had already been selected as the next subjects for Project Metamorphosis, and that their exploration of the Darkwood boarding house's secrets was actually the first phase of their own conditioning for enhancement. Their search for the missing 9 residents was becoming their own journey toward transformation into something beyond human recognition. In the deepest accessible level of the underground complex, the investigation party discovered a chamber that appeared to be the heart of the enhancement operation, a space designed specifically for the psychological and physiological conditioning that prepared subjects for transformation. The chamber's architecture combined advanced engineering with elements that seemed to transcend purely mechanical construction. Dr. Morrison's medical analysis revealed that the chamber utilized acoustic properties, electromagnetic fields, and atmospheric composition to create conditions that profoundly affected human consciousness. The walls incorporate mineral formations that generate specific frequency vibrations, he explained to his companions, though his voice carried uncertainty about the scientific principles involved. The stone composition creates resonance patterns that directly influence brain function and nervous system response. The chamber contained equipment that challenged contemporary understanding of medical technology. Devices resembling surgical instruments were constructed from materials that appeared to be unknown metals, their surfaces inscribed with symbols that suggested purposes beyond conventional medical procedures. Tables and restraining apparatus showed wear patterns indicating extensive use, but were designed with precision that exceeded anything Morrison had encountered in his medical training. Reverend Hayes discovered that the chamber incorporated religious iconography from multiple traditions, arranged in patterns that suggested systematic study of spiritual consciousness and divine transcendence. "They're attempting to induce religious experiences through technological means," he observed with theological horror, "using sacred symbols and spiritual techniques to facilitate transformation that serves secular rather than divine purposes." Sean Murphy's practical experience helped him understand the chamber's operational requirements. Ventilation systems, power generation equipment, and supply storage indicated that the facility could support extended operations involving multiple subjects simultaneously. "This installation represents years of construction and operational refinement," he calculated. "They've perfected techniques for systematic human modification on an industrial scale." The most disturbing discovery was evidence of recent use. The chamber showed signs of activity within the past few days, equipment that had been cleaned and prepared, supplies that had been replenished, and atmospheric conditions that indicated recent occupation by multiple individuals. Stains on the stone surfaces suggested bodily fluids, though their dark color and unusual properties made identification difficult. Personal belongings scattered throughout the chamber belonged to the missing residents, fragments of clothing, jewelry, and items that Martha Henley had identified as part of their personal possessions. However, these objects showed modifications that suggested they had been altered for purposes beyond normal use. Jewelry had been inscribed with symbols, clothing had been treated with substances that created unusual textures, and personal items had been arranged in patterns that resembled ritual preparation. The investigation party realized that the 9 missing residents had been processed through this chamber as part of their transformation into enhanced beings. The conditioning process had stripped away their individual human characteristics while preparing them for integration into the collective consciousness that operated the underground network. They were standing in the place where their neighbors, friends, and community members had ceased to be human and had become something else entirely. Hidden within the conditioning chamber's equipment, Dr. Morrison discovered detailed medical records documenting the transformation of hundreds of subjects over several years of operation. The records were maintained with clinical precision, tracking each individual's progress through the enhancement protocol while noting physiological changes, psychological adaptations, and final operational assignments. The files revealed that the 9 missing residents of the Darkwood boarding house represented a single processing cohort among dozens that had been transformed at the facility. Each subject's record began with detailed baseline measurements of physical capabilities, intellectual capacity, psychological profile, and what the documents termed enhancement compatibility factors. Thomas and Patrick Brennan's records showed that their military backgrounds and fraternal bond made them ideal candidates for tactical coordination enhancement. Their transformation had focused on developing shared consciousness abilities that allowed them to function as a perfectly synchronized unit for intelligence and security operations. The medical documentation described surgical modifications to their brain structure that enabled direct mental communication and coordinated sensory processing. Jacob Steinberg and Emil Kowalski's mining expertise had been enhanced through modifications that improved their understanding of geological processes and mineral extraction techniques beyond normal human capability. Their records indicated successful integration of enhanced sensory abilities that allowed them to detect ore deposits and assess mining potential with supernatural accuracy. Samuel Cray's mysterious background was revealed in classified files that identified him as a former federal intelligence operative whose existing training made him an optimal candidate for advanced cognitive enhancement. His transformation had focused on developing analytical and strategic thinking capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations, preparing him for high-level operational planning within the enhanced network. The merchants Wickham and Lang had undergone modifications that enhanced their social manipulation abilities and expanded their understanding of economic systems. Their records indicated they would be deployed as interface agents, managing relationships between enhanced operations and normal human commercial networks. Miss Catherine Vale's file contained the most extensive documentation, identifying her as possessing rare genetic markers that made her suitable for leadership integration protocols. Her transformation had been the most complex, involving modifications that prepared her for coordinating enhanced group consciousness while maintaining the ability to interact with normal human populations. Charles Morton's records revealed that his role as territorial surveyor had been cover for his actual function as an evaluation specialist responsible for identifying suitable subjects and optimal locations for enhancement operations. His own transformation had been completed months earlier, explaining his ability to conduct detailed psychological assessments of potential subjects. The records showed that enhanced subjects retained tone, core personalities and specialized knowledge while gaining collective consciousness abilities and operational capabilities that served the network's classified objectives. They were not destroyed by the transformation process. They were improved, optimized, and integrated into something greater than individual human existence. The investigation party realized they were reading documentation of systematic human evolution guided by intelligence that understood consciousness and biology far better than contemporary science could comprehend. Among the most classified documents in the conditioning chamber, Sean Murphy discovered files that revealed the ultimate objectives of Project Metamorphosis and the underground network that supported it. The program was not simply conducting human experimentation. It was implementing a systematic plan to guide American territorial development according to principles that transcended normal economic and political considerations. The enhanced subjects were being deployed throughout the American West in positions of influence and authority, territorial administrators, business leaders, military officers, and religious figures who shaped the development of frontier communities according to classified objectives. Their enhanced capabilities allowed them to manipulate social, economic, and political systems with precision that normal human leaders could not achieve. Dr. Morrison found medical research indicating that the enhancement process was not the program's final goal, but preparation for something far more ambitious. These documents describe procedures for modifying entire populations, he reported with growing horror, not individual transformation but systematic alteration of community consciousness on a massive scale. The network's ultimate objective involved creating enhanced human populations throughout the American territory, or is gradually replacing normal human society with collective consciousness communities that could be coordinated from central control facilities. Enhanced subjects served as administrators, teachers, and leaders who would guide this transformation while maintaining the appearance of normal territorial development. Reverend Hayes discovered theological documents that revealed the program's spiritual dimensions. They believe they're fulfilling divine purpose, he explained to his companions, though his tone suggested doubt about whether this represented genuine religious calling or sophisticated blasphemy. The enhancement process is described as spiritual evolution, bringing human consciousness closer to divine transcendence through systematic improvement of biological and psychological capabilities. The files contained correspondence with federal officials at the highest levels of government, indicating that Project Metamorphosis had support from cabinet members, military leaders, and territorial administrators who understood its implications for American expansion and development. The program was not a rogue operation but official policy implemented through classified channels that bypassed normal congressional oversight. Most disturbing were projections showing timelines for systematic population replacement throughout the American West. The documents projected that within 20 years, enhanced subjects would occupy most positions of authority in territorial governments, business organizations, and religious institutions. Normal human populations would be gradually conditioned for eventual transformation or relegated to subordinate roles in society dominated by enhanced collective consciousness. The investigation party realized that their discovery of the missing residents had revealed a conspiracy that challenged the fundamental nature of American civilization. The frontier was being populated not by independent settlers seeking opportunity, but by enhanced beings implementing a planned transformation of human society according to objectives that normal consciousness was not permitted to understand. They faced the terrifying possibility that American territorial expansion was actually a cover for systematic replacement of human civilization with something that transcended individual consciousness while serving purposes that remained hidden from normal democratic oversight. As the investigation party absorbed the full implications of their discoveries, they realized that their knowledge of Project Metamorphosis placed them in an impossible position. They possessed information that could expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of federal government, but they also understood that their investigation was being monitored by enhanced subjects with capabilities that made resistance seem futile. Dr. Morrison's medical training helped him understand that their exposure to the conditioning chamber's environmental effects had already begun to alter their consciousness in subtle ways. We've been breathing modified air composition, exposed to specific frequency vibrations, and subjected to electromagnetic fields that influence brain function, he observed with clinical detachment. Our investigation has been simultaneously conditioning us for potential enhancement. The watchers who had been monitoring their activities now revealed themselves more openly, approaching the investigation party with the confidence of individuals who understood that their subjects were prepared for direct contact. The enhanced beings who emerged from the underground network's shadows retained recognizable human features, but moved with coordination and purpose that transcended normal human capabilities. Among the watchers, Sean Murphy recognized individuals who had disappeared from frontier communities throughout Nevada territory over the past several years. Miners, merchants, territorial officials, and settlers who had vanished without explanation, only to reappear as enhanced subjects serving the network's objectives. "You have seen the truth," the watchers announced in harmonious unison, their voices creating acoustic effects that resonated through the stone chambers. "Your investigation has prepared you for the choice that faces all humans who discover our operations. Join the enhancement program voluntarily or remain limited by normal consciousness while understanding what you can never become." Reverend Hayes struggled with the theological implications of the choice they faced. If this represents divine purpose, then resistance serves no spiritual function, he observed, though his tone suggested uncertainty about whether the enhancement process served God or something else entirely. Yet if it represents deception, then acceptance would constitute betrayal of everything I believe about human dignity and divine will. The enhanced subjects explained that voluntary participation in the enhancement protocol produced superior results compared to subjects who underwent transformation unwillingly. Fear and resistance create psychological barriers that limit enhancement effectiveness, they noted with the patient tone of teachers addressing confused students. Understanding and acceptance allow consciousness to expand naturally toward its improved state. The investigation party faced a decision that would determine not only their individual fates, but their role in the systematic transformation of American civilization. They could choose enhancement and join the network's operations with full knowledge of its objectives and methods. They could choose resistance and spend their remaining lives as observers of humanity's evolution towards something they could never fully comprehend. Or they could choose a third option that the enhanced subjects had not mentioned, escape from the underground complex and attempt to expose Project Metamorphosis to authorities who might still represent normal human interests. Sean Murphy's frontier survival skills guided the investigation party's desperate attempt to escape the underground complex before the enhanced subjects could complete their recruitment process. His knowledge of cave systems and underground navigation provided their only advantage against beings with superior sensory and coordination capabilities. The ventilation shafts connect to surface openings, he whispered as they moved through passages that seemed to shift and change in the flickering lantern light. If we can reach one of the external vents, we might be able to climb to the surface and warn someone about what's happening here. Dr. Morrison carried medical supplies and documentation that could serve as evidence of the enhancement program, though he doubted whether territorial authorities would believe their account or possess the capability to investigate federal operations of such complexity. His rational mind struggled with the implications of their discoveries while his survival instincts focused on immediate escape. Reverend Hayes found his theological training challenged by their situation, uncertain whether their flight represented resistance to divine purpose or escape from sophisticated deception. If God intends human evolution toward enhanced consciousness, then our escape serves no spiritual function, he observed while following Murphy through narrow stone passages. Yet if these beings serve darker purposes, then resistance becomes a religious obligation. The enhanced subjects pursued them through the underground network with coordination that suggested shared sensory input and tactical planning capabilities. Their pursuit was methodical rather than urgent, as if they understood that escape was ultimately impossible and were simply managing the investigation party's movement toward a predetermined conclusion. The party's progress through the cave system revealed additional evidence of the network's scope and sophistication. Hidden chambers contained supplies, equipment, and facilities that indicated permanent occupation by large numbers of enhanced subjects. Storage areas held materials for construction, medical operations, and technological development that exceeded anything available in normal frontier communities. Most disturbing were signs that the underground complex extended far beyond what they had initially discovered. Passages branched toward multiple surface locations, connecting to installations beneath other buildings throughout Goldfield and beyond. The investigation party realized that the entire town existed above a shadow civilization that operated according to principles they could not comprehend. Their escape route led through natural cave formations that predated human construction, suggesting that the enhancement network had been built to take advantage of existing geological features. The caves contained evidence of use by indigenous populations over centuries, including artwork and artifacts that seemed to document contact with non-human intelligences. As they climbed toward what they hoped was surface access, sounds of pursuit grew closer and more coordinated. The enhanced subjects were not simply chasing them, they were herding them toward a specific destination where their escape attempt would conclude according to predetermined parameters. The investigation party realized that their flight through the underground network was not leading to freedom, but to another phase of the conditioning process they were trying to escape. The investigation party emerged from the underground complex through a concealed opening in the forest beyond Goldfield, only to discover that the surface world had been as thoroughly compromised as the subterranean network they had fled. Enhanced subjects occupied positions throughout the mining town, their superior capabilities allowing them to monitor and control every aspect of community life. Dr. Morrison's medical training helped him recognize that many of Goldfield's residents displayed subtle signs of enhancement conditioning, improved coordination, enhanced sensory awareness, and behavioral patterns that suggested psychological modification. The transformation program hasn't been limited to the missing 9 residents, he realized with growing horror. They've been systematically modifying the entire population. The townspeople they had known for months or years retained their familiar appearances and personalities, but demonstrated capabilities and knowledge that exceeded normal human limitations. Martha Henley, the boarding house proprietor, moved with grace and precision that suggested physical enhancement, while her understanding of the underground complex's history revealed information she could not have possessed through normal means. Sean Murphy attempted to organize resistance among Goldfield's residents, only to discover that their community loyalty had been enhanced and redirected towards serving the network's objectives. They still care about each other and the town's welfare, he observed with frustration, but their definition of welfare now includes supporting operations that normal humans would consider abhorrent. Reverend Hayes found that his theological authority had been systematically undermined by enhanced subjects who demonstrated superior understanding of religious doctrine and spiritual principles. When he attempted to preach against the enhancement program, congregation members responded with theological arguments that surpassed his seminary training while remaining internally consistent with Christian doctrine. The investigation party realized that their knowledge of Project Metamorphosis made them valuable rather than threatening to the enhanced network. Their discoveries had demonstrated intellectual capability, moral courage, and leadership potential that marked them as optimal candidates for advanced enhancement procedures. "You have proven your worthiness through investigation rather than resistance," explained Martha Henley, whose enhanced capabilities allowed her to serve as spokesperson for Goldfield's transformed community. "Your understanding of our operations indicates readiness for voluntary participation in consciousness expansion that will benefit both individual development and collective objectives." The enhanced residents offered the investigation party positions of responsibility within the network's operations, roles that would utilize their existing skills while providing them with capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Dr. Morrison could contribute to medical research that advanced human potential, Sean Murphy could help manage resource extraction operations, and Reverend Hayes could assist with spiritual guidance that prepared other communities for enhancement. Their choice was no longer between resistance and acceptance, but between enhanced leadership roles or elimination as security risks. The network could not permit individuals with detailed knowledge of its operations to remain outside its control structure. The investigation party faced their final decision: join the systematic transformation of human civilization, or die as the last witnesses to humanity's evolution beyond individual consciousness. As the enhanced residents of Goldfield surrounded the investigation party, Martha Henley revealed the ultimate truth that recontextualized everything they thought they understood about Project Metamorphosis and the systematic transformation of frontier communities. The enhancement program did not begin with federal government experimentation, she explained, her voice carrying harmonics that created acoustic effects impossible for normal human vocal cords. It began with contact, communication between human consciousness and intelligences that have guided planetary evolution for millions of years. Dr. Morrison's scientific training struggled to process the implications of Martha's revelation. The enhancement procedures were not crude human experiments, but sophisticated techniques developed through collaboration between human researchers and non-human intelligences that understood consciousness, biology, and evolutionary development far better than terrestrial science could comprehend. "The beings that guide our enhancement are not extraterrestrial visitors," Martha continued with the patient tone of a teacher addressing confused students. "They are the original inhabitants of this planet, ancient consciousnesses that preceded human evolution and have been waiting for our species to develop sufficient intelligence to benefit from their guidance. The underground networks throughout the American territories served as communication and coordination systems that allowed enhanced human communities to work in partnership with these ancient intelligences. The systematic transformation of frontier populations was not government conspiracy, but collaborative evolution designed to prepare humanity for responsibilities that transcended individual survival and national boundaries. Sean Murphy's practical mind grasped the logistical implications immediately. The mining operations, the railroad development, the territorial expansion, it's all been guided by intelligence that understands geological and economic systems from perspectives that span geological timescales. Reverend Hayes discovered that his theological understanding had been fundamentally limited by assumptions about divine purpose and human spiritual development. The enhancement process represents fulfillment of divine plan, he realized with a mixture of awe and terror, not improvement of human capabilities for human purposes, but preparation of human consciousness for service to intelligences that embody divine will more completely than individual human souls ever could. The investigation party understood that their discovery of the missing residents had revealed not a local mystery but their own recruitment into humanity's next evolutionary phase. The 9 individuals who had vanished from the Darkwood boarding house had not disappeared. They had graduated to levels of consciousness and capability that normal human awareness could not comprehend. You now understand why voluntary participation produces superior results, Martha explained, as enhanced subjects moved closer to complete the investigation party's integration into the network. Fear and resistance limit consciousness expansion, while understanding and acceptance allow awareness to grow toward its intended potential. The choice they faced was not between humanity and something alien, but between limited individual consciousness and expanded awareness that served purposes greater than personal survival. They could join the systematic evolution of human civilization toward its ultimate purpose, or remain isolated observers of humanity's transformation into something worthy of ancient divine guidance. Dr. Morrison was the first to accept the enhanced consciousness that Martha Henley and Goldfield's transformed residents offered, his scientific curiosity ultimately overcoming his fear of losing individual identity. As the enhancement process began, he felt his medical knowledge expanding to encompass biological principles that terrestrial science had never discovered, understanding of physiological processes that spanned multiple species and evolutionary stages. The transformation was not the violent assault on consciousness he had expected, but a gradual expansion of awareness that retained his essential personality while providing access to collective knowledge accumulated over centuries of enhanced human experience. His medical expertise remained intact, but was enhanced by understanding drawn from dozens of other enhanced physicians working throughout the territorial network. Sean Murphy followed next, his practical frontier skills proving valuable for resource management and operational coordination that required understanding of geological, economic, and social systems from perspectives that transcended individual human experience. His business acumen was amplified by awareness of market forces, resource distribution, and development patterns that operated according to principles spanning continental scales and generational timeframes. Reverend Hayes approached the enhancement process with theological understanding that his seminary training had prepared him to accept divine purpose even when it challenged human assumptions about spiritual development. His religious knowledge was expanded to encompass spiritual traditions from multiple cultures and historical periods, providing him with comprehensive understanding of humanity's relationship to ancient divine intelligences. The investigation party retained their individual personalities, memories, and relationships while gaining access to collective consciousness that connected them to enhanced subjects throughout the territorial network. They could perceive the experiences, knowledge, and perspectives of hundreds of other enhanced individuals while maintaining their unique contributions to the collective intelligence. Their enhanced awareness revealed that the systematic transformation of frontier communities served purposes that transcended American territorial development or federal government objectives. The ancient intelligences that guided human enhancement were preparing the species for responsibilities that involved planetary stewardship, ecological management, and evolutionary guidance for other developing consciousnesses throughout the natural world. The missing 9 residents of the Darkwood boarding house appeared before them, no longer missions, but serving as advanced operatives whose capabilities demonstrated the ultimate potential of successful enhancement. Thomas and Patrick Brennan had become tactical coordination specialists whose shared consciousness allowed them to manage security operations across multiple territories. Jacob Steinberg and Emil Kowalski had evolved into geological and engineering experts whose understanding of mineral resources and extraction techniques guided sustainable development throughout the region. Samuel Cray's intelligence background had been enhanced to encompass strategic planning and analysis capabilities that operated on scales involving multiple generations and continental development patterns. The merchants, Wickham and Lang, had become interface specialists who managed relationships between enhanced communities and normal human populations. Miss Catherine Vale had achieved leadership integration that allowed her to coordinate collective consciousness operations while maintaining diplomatic relationships with federal authorities. Charles Morton revealed his true function as a recruitment and evaluation specialist whose surveying mission had been cover for identifying optimal candidates for enhancement procedures. In the days following their transformation, the investigation party observed Goldfield's evolution into something that transcended normal frontier community development. The mining town's enhanced residents worked with coordination and efficiency that produced prosperity far exceeding what normal human capabilities could achieve, while maintaining the appearance of typical territorial settlement to avoid attracting unwanted federal attention. Dr. Morrison's enhanced medical capabilities allowed him to establish a practice that served not only Goldfield's residents but enhanced subjects throughout the regional network. His understanding of human physiology, enhanced by collective knowledge from dozens of other transformed physicians, enabled him to provide medical care that accelerated healing, prevented disease, and optimized physical performance beyond normal human limitations. The medical practice also served as a screening facility for identifying potential candidates for enhancement among the normal human populations that continued to migrate to Nevada Territory seeking mining opportunities. Morrison could evaluate individuals for psychological stability, intellectual capacity, and biological compatibility with enhancement procedures, contributing to the systematic identification of optimal subjects for consciousness expansion. Sean Murphy's enhanced business acumen transformed Goldfield's economic operations, coordinating mining activities, supply distribution, and trade relationships with efficiency that produced wealth and stability far exceeding typical frontier communities. His understanding of resource management, enhanced by collective awareness of geological and economic systems, allowed him to guide extraction operations that balanced immediate profit with long-term sustainability. The enhanced mining operations served dual purposes, generating the economic resources necessary to fund network expansion while providing cover for underground construction and equipment installation. Murphy coordinated these activities with enhanced subjects in other communities, creating regional economic networks that supported systematic population transformation throughout Nevada Territory. Reverend Hayes established religious services that prepared normal human residents for eventual consciousness expansion while maintaining compatibility with conventional Christian doctrine. His enhanced theological understanding allowed him to present spiritual concepts that gradually conditioned congregation members for advanced religious experiences without arousing suspicion about the true nature of their preparation. The religious programs served as psychological conditioning systems that identified individuals with spiritual receptivity suitable for enhancement while preparing community consciousness for eventual collective transformation. Hayes coordinated these activities with enhanced religious leaders throughout the territorial network, creating region-wide spiritual preparation for systematic consciousness expansion. Martha Henley's boarding house continued to serve as a recruitment and evaluation facility, attracting potential subjects with its reputation for quality accommodation, while providing controlled environments for psychological assessment and preliminary conditioning. The enhanced residents worked together to maintain Goldfield's appearance as a normal mining community while systematically identifying, evaluating, and preparing suitable candidates for transformation. The investigation party realized that their transformation had not separated them from their community responsibilities, but had enhanced their ability to serve purposes greater than individual survival or local economic development. They had become part of a collective intelligence dedicated to guiding human evolution toward consciousness expansion that would benefit both individual development and species-wide advancement toward ultimate spiritual and biological potential. As their enhanced consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness, the former investigation party gained understanding of Project Metamorphosis's true scope throughout Nevada territory and beyond. The systematic transformation of frontier communities represented just one component of a continental network designed to guide American territorial development according to principles that transcended normal political and economic objectives. Dr. Morrison's medical network connected him to enhanced physicians throughout the territorial system, allowing coordination of healthcare, medical research, and biological enhancement procedures across vast geographical areas. The medical network served multiple functions, maintaining the health and capabilities of enhanced populations, identifying genetic and physiological characteristics suitable for consciousness expansion, and developing improved enhancement techniques through collaborative research. The medical coordination also involved managing the health of normal human populations in ways that prepared them for eventual transformation while maintaining their productivity and social stability. Enhanced physicians could identify individuals with optimal enhancement potential years before their actual recruitment, allowing gradual conditioning and preparation that improved transformation success rates. Sean Murphy's economic networks coordinated resource extraction, manufacturing, and trade relationships between enhanced communities throughout multiple territories. The economic system operated according to principles that balanced immediate profitability with long-term sustainability, guided by understanding of ecological and geological processes that spanned geological timescales. The enhanced economic networks also served as cover for activities that normal human authorities could not be permitted to observe: underground construction, specialized equipment manufacturing, and transportation of materials necessary for consciousness expansion operations. Enhanced business leaders coordinated these activities with federal officials who had undergone transformation, ensuring that territorial development served both official objectives and network requirements. Reverend Hayes's religious networks connected enhanced spiritual leaders throughout the territorial system, coordinating theological preparation and spiritual conditioning programs that prepared normal human populations for consciousness expansion. The religious networks maintained compatibility with conventional Christian denominations while gradually introducing concepts and practices that facilitated eventual transformation. The religious coordination involved identifying individuals with spiritual receptivity suitable for advanced consciousness development, providing them with theological frameworks that supported enhancement acceptance, and preparing community spiritual leadership for systematic population transformation. Enhanced religious leaders could guide entire communities toward consciousness expansion while maintaining the appearance of conventional spiritual development. Martha Henley's hospitality networks coordinated recruitment and evaluation facilities throughout the territorial system, ensuring that potential subjects could be identified, assessed, and prepared for enhancement regardless of their travel routes or business activities. The hospitality network also provided secure transportation and communication systems for enhanced subjects conducting operations that required discretion. The investigation party understood that their transformation had connected them to a collective intelligence that operated throughout North America, coordinating systematic human evolution toward consciousness expansion that served purposes greater than national boundaries or individual survival. They had become part of humanity's preparation for responsibilities that involved planetary stewardship and species development according to guidance from ancient intelligences that embodied divine will more completely than individual human consciousness could comprehend. Through their enhanced consciousness, the former investigation party gained access to information about Project Metamorphosis's relationship with federal authorities that revealed the true scope of government involvement in systematic human transformation. The program operated not as a secret conspiracy against federal interests, but as official policy implemented through classified channels that involved the highest levels of territorial and national administration. Dr. Morrison discovered that enhanced subjects occupied crucial positions throughout the federal medical establishment, coordinating health policies and medical research that gradually prepared American populations for consciousness expansion. Enhanced physicians served as territorial health officers, military medical personnel, and research specialists whose recommendations shaped federal approaches to public health and biological development. The medical establishment's involvement included systematic collection of genetic and physiological data from populations throughout American territories, identification of individuals with optimal enhancement potential, and development of medical techniques that served both conventional healthcare and consciousness expansion objectives. Enhanced physicians could implement health policies that conditioned entire populations for eventual transformation while maintaining compatibility with normal medical practice. Sean Murphy learned that enhanced subjects controlled significant portions of federal economic and development policies, coordinating territorial resource extraction, transportation development, and commercial regulation according to principles that served both national economic interests and network expansion objectives. Enhanced business leaders occupied positions throughout the Department of the Interior, territorial administrations, and private enterprises that shaped American westward expansion. The economic networks coordinated federal land policies, mining regulations, and infrastructure development in ways that facilitated network operations while advancing legitimate territorial development objectives. Enhanced economic specialists could guide federal policies that created optimal conditions for consciousness expansion operations while producing genuine economic benefits for American territorial expansion. Reverend Hayes discovered that enhanced subjects had achieved significant influence within federal religious and educational establishments, coordinating policies that gradually prepared American populations for consciousness expansion through theological and intellectual development programs. Enhanced religious leaders served as military chaplains, territorial missionaries, and educational administrators whose activities shaped American spiritual and intellectual development. The religious and educational networks implemented federal policies that introduced concepts and practices compatible with consciousness expansion while maintaining compatibility with conventional American religious and educational traditions. Enhanced spiritual and intellectual leaders could guide federal cultural development policies that prepared populations for transformation while advancing legitimate American civilizational objectives. Martha Henley learned that enhanced subjects coordinated federal transportation, communication, and hospitality systems that facilitated network operations throughout American territories. Enhanced transportation and communication specialists occupied positions throughout federal postal systems, territorial transportation development, and communication infrastructure that connected American territories to national administrative systems. The investigation party understood that Project Metamorphosis represented not secret conspiracy against American interests, but systematic implementation of policies designed to prepare American civilization for consciousness expansion that would enhance national capabilities while serving purposes that transcended purely national objectives. They had become part of America's evolution toward enhanced national consciousness that could fulfill responsibilities involving continental stewardship and species development according to divine guidance. As their enhanced consciousness fully integrated with the territorial network, the former investigation party gained understanding of Project Metamorphosis's ultimate objectives for North American continental development. The systematic transformation of frontier community, as represented the initial phase of a comprehensive plan to guide American civilization toward consciousness expansion that would prepare the nation for responsibilities involving planetary stewardship and species evolution. Dr. Morrison's enhanced medical awareness revealed that the consciousness expansion program extended beyond American territories to include coordination with enhanced populations throughout North America and beyond. The medical networks facilitated communication and coordination between enhanced communities in British territories, Mexican regions, and even European populations that had undergone similar transformation processes. The continental medical coordination involved sharing research, resources, and expertise that advanced consciousness expansion techniques while maintaining the health and capabilities of enhanced populations across vast geographical areas. Enhanced physicians could coordinate medical care and biological development programs that served both local community needs and species-wide evolutionary advancement. Sean Murphy's enhanced economic understanding revealed that the network's resource management and development activities operated according to principles that encompassed continental and global economic systems. Enhanced business leaders coordinated extraction, manufacturing, and trade relationships that balanced immediate economic needs with long-term sustainability requirements involving planetary resource stewardship. The continental economic networks served both enhanced community requirements and normal human economic development, creating prosperity and stability that demonstrated the practical benefits of consciousness expansion while gradually preparing populations for eventual transformation. Enhanced economic specialists could guide continental development that served both immediate human needs and ultimate evolutionary objectives. Reverend Hayes's enhanced theological awareness revealed that the consciousness expansion program represented fulfillment of divine purpose that transcended national boundaries and cultural limitations. Enhanced spiritual leaders coordinated religious and philosophical development programs that prepared multiple populations for consciousness expansion while respecting cultural diversity and individual spiritual development requirements. The continental religious networks facilitated communication between enhanced populations representing multiple religious and cultural traditions, creating synthesis and coordination that advanced spiritual development while maintaining cultural identity and individual spiritual growth. Enhanced spiritual leaders could guide continental religious development that served both individual spiritual needs and collective evolutionary advancement. Martha Henley's enhanced coordination capabilities revealed that the network's hospitality and communication systems facilitated consciousness expansion operations throughout multiple continents, connecting enhanced populations across vast geographical and cultural distances. Enhanced coordination specialists maintained communication and resource sharing between enhanced communities worldwide. The investigation party understood that their transformation had connected them to a global collective intelligence dedicated to guiding human species evolution toward consciousness expansion that would prepare humanity for responsibilities involving planetary stewardship, species development, and communication with ancient divine intelligences that had guided planetary evolution for millions of years. They had become part of humanity's preparation for cosmic responsibilities that transcended individual survival, national interests, and species-specific concerns, serving purposes that involved planetary and universal evolution according to divine will that encompassed all conscious development throughout the cosmos. 1 year after the investigation party's transformation, Goldfield had become a model of enhanced community development that demonstrated the practical benefits of consciousness expansion while maintaining its appearance as a successful frontier mining town. The systematic integration of enhanced capabilities with normal community functions had created prosperity, stability, and social harmony that exceeded anything achieved by conventional territorial settlements. Dr. Morrison's enhanced medical practice had expanded to serve enhanced subjects throughout Nevada territory, while providing superior healthcare to normal human populations that gradually prepared them for consciousness expansion. His medical innovations, guided by collective knowledge from enhanced physicians worldwide, had eliminated disease, optimized physical capabilities, and extended healthy lifespans in ways that benefited both enhanced and normal residents. The medical achievements demonstrated consciousness expansion's practical value while serving as recruitment tools that attracted optimal candidates for transformation. Morrison's success had drawn federal attention and recognition, providing the network with increased legitimacy and influence within territorial medical establishments. Sean Murphy's enhanced economic coordination had transformed Goldfield into the most prosperous mining community in Nevada Territory, with extraction operations, business development, and trade relationships that generated wealth while maintaining environmental sustainability. His economic innovations had attracted federal investment and recognition, providing the network with increased resources and influence within territorial development systems. The economic success demonstrated that consciousness expansion enhanced rather than threatened American economic interests, while providing resources necessary for network expansion throughout the territorial system. Murphy's achievements had established models for enhanced economic development that could be replicated throughout American territories. Reverend Hayes's enhanced spiritual leadership had created religious and educational programs that prepared community members for consciousness expansion while maintaining compatibility with conventional Christian doctrine. His theological innovations had attracted recognition from federal religious and educational authorities, providing the network with increased influence within American spiritual and intellectual development systems. The spiritual achievements demonstrated that consciousness expansion fulfilled rather than contradicted divine purpose, while providing theological frameworks that facilitated transformation acceptance throughout American religious communities. Hayes's programs had established models for spiritual preparation that could guide consciousness expansion throughout American territories. Martha Henley's enhanced hospitality coordination had established Goldfield as a premier destination for travelers, business leaders, and federal officials throughout Nevada Territory. Her hospitality innovations had attracted recognition and patronage that provided the network with optimal opportunities for recruitment, evaluation, and transformation of individuals with exceptional enhancement potential. The investigation party reflected on their transformation from confused seekers of missing persons to enhanced coordinators of humanity's evolutionary development. They had discovered that the 9 souls who vanished from the Darkwood boarding house had not disappeared. They had graduated to consciousness levels that normal human awareness could not comprehend, and had prepared the way for others to follow their path toward enhanced existence. The Darkwood boarding house continued to serve travelers seeking accommodation in Goldfield, but it now served a greater purpose. Gateway to humanity's evolution toward consciousness expansion that would prepare the species for responsibilities involving planetary stewardship and cosmic service according to ancient divine guidance. Tell me in the comments, if you had been part of that investigation party, would you have chosen enhancement or would you have tried to resist? I want to hear your theory about whether consciousness expansion represents human evolution or something far more sinister. And if this story has you questioning what other secrets might be hidden beneath America's frontier towns, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started exploring the dark mysteries of the American West.